Well, hello, my old house fans. It is the 12th of July, 2024. It's an overcast and rainy day today, but it is a little bit cooler. Yesterday was in the 90s, today's in the upper 70s, thanks to all the cloud cover. As you can see, I'm looking at the floor in my dining room, and I had to think about how I was going to do these floors. Originally, I thought that the finish on the floor and the condition of the floor was sufficient for me to just clean them up, maybe buff them with a Scotch-Brite pad and then call it a day, but I figured I was going to have to refinish them anyway, so let me get that out of the way before I bring all the furniture into the house. The second thing I thought about was these floors here on the first level are white oak, and I thought that maybe I could finish them or sand them off, sand off all the old finish, and then just leave the white oak as it is and put clear polyurethane on top, several coats in a matte finish, and go with the natural. I'm not 100% sure if that's the way I'm going to go, or if I'm going to go with a stain and then the polyurethane. I had given some thought originally to using a drum sander on the floors to do the stripping. And I know that a drum sander can be very aggressive, and if you're not careful, it's easy to put a gouge or 2 or 10 in your floors. So I found a machine, talked to the manufacturer, and it's a machine called U-Sand, the letter U-S-A-N-D, and it's less aggressive than a drum sander like this machine here. And it's a 4-head random orbit sanding machine. So conceptually, it would be fine, except for the fact that this is white oak and the floor was not in excellent condition for refinishing. In fact, when I got the U-Sand and put 36 grit discs on the 4 heads of the sander and then did the sander, well, it scratched away the old Varathane coat on it, but really did not do much in the way of getting the old stain off the boards. So I gave it about an hour's worth of work, and it wasn't satisfactory, so I returned the U-Sand machine, which would probably work just fine if you had a perfectly level floor, no cupping, no ridges, nothing like that, and only a light amount of stain or finish to remove. However, again, I spoke to the manufacturer of the U-Sand machine there in Pennsylvania, and they in fact went to the producer of this old house, Russell Morash's house, many years ago, and used the U-Sand on his floors. Of course, you know, they're going to be in the house of the guy that produces this old house, and so they're going to be doing whatever it takes to get the job done. I'm just a little old DIY guy, and the U-Sand machine was wholly unsatisfactory for my application. So as I say, I went and got the, but it would work as a finish sander. So if you had a parquet floor or an inlaid floor and it was dead flat, and all you need to do was touch it up a little bit, the U-Sand would probably be fine. But in any event, I returned the U-Sand machine and got this Silverline drum sander, and this is an SL7 version 2, and the version 2 is such that it uses a hook and loop belt on the drum, and that makes it very easy to change. No tools required. Some of your older Clark type drum sanders, you got to have a screwdriver, and you got to put the paper under a bar and tuck it in and blah, blah, blah. This is a little easier than that. However, in this instance, I also had some difficulty. This machine is pretty heavy, and it's set up so that it pivots. So it's easy to control where and when the drum is against the floor. So it's much less likely to gouge the floor if you're not paying attention. And so there, it makes it a little bit easier. But again, in case of my floor, it did not cut away the old finish the way I expected it to. Although you're looking at the floor now, which seems to be fairly well stripped. And what I had to do with that particular machine was I actually had to lift up the rear wheels so that the drum itself was the only thing of the machine in contact with the floor, using a 20 grit belt, which is pretty aggressive. It still proved problematic in removing the finish. So that would indicate that even though you can't really see it very well with the eye, that my floor was in bad condition in the sense that the boards were probably cupped. So on this section of the dining room floor, I actually had to go at a 45-degree angle across the boards and then come back and go with the grain. So this section of the floor here has been gone over about 8 or 10 times with the 20 grit paper, and as you can see, there are still sections of this floor that still have the stain on it. So I have to continue to work on this, and in some instances I actually have to work with smaller tools, like I have a Makita 3x21 belt sander, and I have a DeWalt 5-inch random orbit sander. And you can see here, against the wall for about 6 inches, I actually did that with the 5-inch random orbit sander, and then over here to the left, this was done with the big drum machine. And as you can see, the drum machine, using a 20 grit belt, still left remnants of the stain that needs to come off. So I might either have to go over that again a dozen times with the drum sander, or get my 3x21 or the 5-inch random orbit and touch it up. In either case, it's a very laborious process. And I had gotten 3 quotes, 2 in the $5,000 neighborhood and 1 in the $8,000 neighborhood, to do the floors and the stairs in the whole house. But I tell you, if they were using a machine like this, which would be fairly common, a drum sander and an edger, whoever I hired would have encountered the same issue. And then you get into the situation, they say, well, gee, it took a lot longer and we're going to charge you more money. So I just didn't want to bother with that. So I'm not doing that much different than any professional would do. I've got the equipment. I'm not a veteran sander of floors, but when you have a 20 grit disc or belt and you're going over a white oak floor, the manufacturer of this machine in Massachusetts I spoke with, I even sent him pictures, and he said my floor was not remarkable, meaning that it doesn't look like that it's too out of whack. So as I say, it's just probably just cupped just enough that you don't see it readily with the naked eye, but as far as the drum and belt are concerned, it needs to be cut down some more, which is what I'll do. I have the machine for a week, and I have spare belts, and even though it costs some money, it's a lot less than $5,000. And again, these floors here on the first floor are white oak, and when I get to the upstairs, which will be, I don't know when, but those are pine up there, so that's going to be a softer wood, so I may sand more quickly so that I can get down to the bare wood. Here in the front hall, obviously the drum machine, I can't get into some of the spaces like here at the bottom of the stairs, so I'm going to do that with the belt sander 3x21, and I'm using a 50 grit belt because that's what I have. I've got about 10 of those. So, but you can see around the edge where I've used the 50 grit discs for the 5-inch random orbit sander, and that has gotten it down to the bare wood. So I'll get this middle section here with the old stain and some wear with the belt sander, and likewise in some of these places that I need to come back and get into a piece of wood where the belt sander, not the belt sander, but the drum sander wouldn't finish in a few passes easily. I may have to do that with the belt sander, and we'll see how that goes. But the rest of the hallway here, you can see after 4 passes with the drum sander, it's still very splotchy. Some spots cleaned up pretty well. Other spots, I still have a lot of remnant of the stain on the floor, so got to take care of that. Because before I can move on to the finer grit sandpapers, like I have belts of 60 grit and belts of 100 grit, I have to make sure that I have gotten the floor stripped down to the bare wood. I wouldn't want to stain over old stain. So I need to, sections like this strip of wood here, and so forth across the room. There are still several places where I have to continue to sand and get those areas down to bare wood. Plus here at the edge, the drum sander can't get too close. I'll have to come back with the 5-inch random orbit sander at this area. But that actually seems to work fairly well. I'm pleased with that. I'm just not pleased with the first machine I rented, the U-Sand. The concept makes sense, but in my application it was totally useless. And here with the drum sander, again, this is a well thought out machine. It's just not cutting it here, even with a 20 grit belt, which seems, it was just not my expectation that this machine would have so much trouble trying to get this floor down to bare wood. Because 20 grit is a pretty aggressive. There are not too many grits. I think there's only 1 or 2 grits left. And you get a 12 grit belt, and it's like there's 30 pieces of grit on it, and now I'm just doing nothing but scratching the floor. So in any event, I'll get it fixed and get it finished, and then the question is whether I want to go with the natural white oak or go with the stain. And I'm tending to think, because I may not be able to get it perfectly uniform, that is, I may not be able to get all of the old stain splotches removed without having to go too far down into the wood. So I may decide that I'll do a stain of a similar tone, and then these splotches won't be very visible. I'll get them to a minimum, but I don't want to spend 3 weeks trying to get 100% bare wood if it's not going to happen. So that's the situation with the floors at my old house in Preston, Maryland, toward the middle of July 2024. And of course, when I do get the finish down, whether it's stain or not, I'll use a waterborne because it takes a little less time to dry, but still probably want to be looking at a couple weeks of good cure time for the polyurethane coating on top, and before I put any rugs or furniture on the floor. But better than it was as far as the old finish is concerned, so progress is being made, and that's the name of the game. So we'll see you next time from my old house in Preston.